Hi, everybody. This is a brief introduction to narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, which we're going to be talking about in this next unit in XIDS 2000 that focuses on um, the early abolitionist movement in the 19th century in the United States, as well as the people who tried to defend slavery and why it existed for as long as it had. Um, Obviously, people have been critical of slavery since it was first practiced, especially the people who were enslaved. And a lot of what happened had to do with who was controlling power and who controlled those conversations. So we're going to see what those conversations were like. The role-playing exercise we'll be doing will be in response to kind of the celebrity of Frederick Douglass and some of the issues that his writings raised. You'll see when books are digitized, there's often what's called provenance, Provenance, which is a history of where the book has been. So one woman, Ruth Bussum, gave this copy to Margaret Welch. It looks like first let's see. So it was given to Margaret Welch. And then it looks like Welch gave it to John Radford. So that kind of shows us what the provenance of it was. So Miss Welch receives it, reads it, enjoys it, thinks that Radford will enjoy it, and then gives it to him. Here is a portrait of Frederick Douglass from the early 19th century. Dressed in business-like, gentlemanly clothes of the time, with very natural styled hair. It's not straightened or overly affective. So if you see the way books' titles worked in the 18th and 19th centuries, often the book would give you a clue of, like, the title would give you a clue of what the book would be about. Today, you can have, a random word be the title of a book and you have no idea what the book will be. But in this case, one of the most important things is these three words here, written by himself. Because there were many arguments against the literacy of enslaved people. And it was complicated because people would believe that as a Christian, you should be able to read the Bible. At the same time, there were people who worried that someone who was enslaved would do something dangerous with literacy. And then there were people who believed that that kind of racist, eugenicist notion that there was somehow like something genetically different about enslaved African Americans, that, I guess literacy would not be important for them. One thing that would happen, this is an epigraph from John Greenleaf Whittier, who was an abolitionist 19th century American poet. And one of the things that abolitionists tried to do would be to emphasize the grim nature and experience in slavery. What ho, our countrymen in chains, the whip on woman's shrinking flesh, our soil still reddening with the stains, caught from her scourging, warm and fresh. What mothers from their children riven, what God's own image bought and sold, Americans to market driven and bartered as the brute for gold. And there's a lot to unpack in those lines. And I think some of the most important arguments were, these people are Americans, and, you're enslaving your own countrymen. You're enslaving God's own image, man. That there is, layer upon layer of deeply unethical choices that are made. Mothers and their children split up. It's, one of the worst legacies of slavery. So the front matter, the prefatory material here, is very important because, you see, Adam, this is an edition published in Ireland. So here's some commentary at, the committee. So this is a little, blurb about why he's in Ireland. So he writes a special preface for this edition in Ireland, which you don't have to read this particular one. But I find it interesting that he's an international figure. Slavery in Britain had been outlawed, and Britain had colonized Ireland, and Glasgow is in Scotland. So there's a lot of geographical stuff happening here. But I mean, there were several decades in between slavery being outlawed in Britain and in the US. So there was a lot more sympathy for abolitionist causes in Britain, in the 19th century. And so one thing that had to be proven was that Frederick Douglass really did write this. When you were Black in like the 1700s, the 1800s, and you write a book, people are going to roll up and say, well, this is a really smart book. What was it written by like a white person? And just you're saying it's by a Black person. It's like, come on, man. So that was the way that people would try to undermine Black authority, and people would try to legitimate their own racism and try to do what people do now. I mean, you see it in trials and in the law and politics. People try to undermine the other person's argument with whatever tools they have. So what you end up having is people testifying to the fact that, that this is a brilliant man who you'll see here, he has a sensitive mind in a novel position. You see that he's addressed conventions. You see that, the way he tells his story in his own words is very moving. I rose and declared that Patrick Henry of Revolutionary fame never made a speech more eloquent in the cause of liberty than the one we had just listened to from the lips of that hunted fugitive. So if you were reading this book and, let's say, are a skeptical audience, seeing this preface where Douglass is described as a brilliant orator and speaker might sway you to think, oh, well, he probably wrote it then. So that's reasonable. And I'm interested in his authentic story. You'll see here bolded, slavery as it is. It is essentially true in its statements. Nothing exaggerated. Nothing drawn from the imagination. This is important to the entire book's reception, that this is not someone making it up and pretending it's worse than it is. This is not, what people called fake news in the last few years. That Douglass is sharing an authentic human story. and that if anything, people are treated worse elsewhere, because he was enslaved in Maryland, which it was a lot, I guess, not easier, but less cruel than Georgia or Alabama or Louisiana. One of the worst places to be, in fact, was on any sugarcane farm. Sugarcane is one of the most dangerous crops to grow. So whether you were in Louisiana or Jamaica, or some of the other parts of the Caribbean, it's it has to be harvested almost 24 hours a day during harvest season. It's boiled in these giant vats. It's harvested in the coldest weather of the year. There's all kinds of problems with that. So, sometimes particular crops meant especially cruel treatment. It is a difficult read, but it is also an important book that ended up being really essential to the cause of abolition. So I'm excited for you to read it. I think it goes to the heart of a lot of American history and the contradictions in American history. We talk about interdisciplinarity in this class. And when you think about this particular book, this is narrative, this is autobiography, this is a work of history, this is an episode in politics that is very important and helps to lead to abolition. So we're looking at law, we're looking at English, we're looking at history, we're looking at critical race studies. We are able to learn from, the suspicion of Black voices when we think of any other Black writers and how they are evaluated in comparison to white writers. I think that this is going to be a really great and a really interesting unit. And in the coming weeks, you're going to be asked to adopt a position and try to think through what arguments there were in support of abolition, and how people tried to make a case for slavery. You do not have to I'm pretty sure nobody in the class agrees with slavery. It does. I'm going to make sure that we are very careful in how things are approached and handled. And I'm looking forward to it being a great learning experience that helps us to look at interdisciplinary topics from within. Thank you.